Rain tapped gently against the tall windows of the Seattle Community Art Center as Emma Carter worked late, sorting through stacks of paintbrushes, canvases, and jars of colored pencils, the smell of wet earth from outside mixing with the faint scent of acrylics, creating a strangely comforting atmosphere. The center was almost empty, the usual chatter of students replaced by the soft hum of fluorescent lights, and as she moved through the room, her eyes fell on a man sitting alone near the window, shoulders slightly hunched, staring at his phone as if he were trying to find a place inside himself that no one could reach. Daniel Brooks had only recently returned to the city after a breakup that had shaken him more than he let anyone see, a relationship that had ended with quiet distance rather than arguments, leaving behind a hollow feeling he could neither explain nor shake. And for weeks he had come to the art center, wandering among the supplies, sketching absent-mindedly, always polite but carrying a sadness Emma recognized instantly, a sadness she herself had worn years ago when someone she thought would stay forever had quietly walked away. That evening, Emma felt a pull she could not ignore, an instinct to reach out without forcing herself into his life, and as she passed his table, she stopped and asked softly, "Are you okay?" The question was simple, almost casual, yet the pause afterward felt charged, the weight of unspoken emotions hovering in the air between them. Daniel looked up, startled, as if he hadn't realized anyone noticed him at all, and gave a faint, tired smile that tried to mask the vulnerability beneath it. "I will be," he replied, and though the words were polite, Emma could sense the gap between what he said and what he felt, the quiet ache in his voice revealing more than he intended. She considered leaving it there, letting him be, but something inside her insisted that sometimes people just need to know someone is willing to listen, willing to care, without demanding anything in return. So she offered gently, "If you ever want someone to talk to, I'm around," and in that moment, Daniel's posture softened, a flicker of relief crossing his face, the first hint that he might allow someone into his private world. He nodded, hesitant but thankful, and Emma smiled, knowing she had extended a simple hand of kindness that could grow into something meaningful if he chose to accept it. Neither of them realized then how much this small act of attention would begin to change their lives, how it would become the first step toward trust, connection, and eventually something deeper than either of them expected, because sometimes the quietest moments, the simplest offers, carry the power to shift hearts, and on that rainy evening, two people touched by loss and longing found a fragile but real thread of understanding between them, one that promised hope, companionship, and the slow, careful opening of hearts that had been closed for too long, a beginning that felt fragile yet electric, like the calm before a storm that brings renewal. And Emma left the art center that night feeling a strange mix of curiosity and warmth, unaware that Daniel, who had seemed so closed off and distant, had just let in a light that he didn't even know he needed, while Daniel walked out behind her, carrying the subtle comfort of not being alone, realizing for the first time in weeks that someone might truly see him without judgment, and as they stepped into the cool rain together, sharing a brief, wordless connection, the city lights reflected on the wet pavement like tiny sparks of promise, hinting that their paths had crossed for a reason. And even though neither spoke another word that night, the unspoken agreement lingered, soft and potent, that there could be more to come, more conversations, more shared silences, more understanding, and in that simple, fleeting moment, a story of healing, gentle attraction, and the quiet beginning of trust had begun, ready to unfold with all its emotional twists, tender moments, and the slow, unhurried bloom of something meaningful, marking the first chapter of a journey neither Emma nor Daniel knew would eventually bring them closer in ways they could not yet imagine. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel Brooks began staying later at the art center, lingering not out of obligation but because he found himself drawn to Emma Carter in ways he hadn't expected, the quiet presence of someone who genuinely listened and never judged slowly filling the emptiness that had shadowed him since his breakup, while Emma, in turn, felt a warmth in seeing him open up, a soft satisfaction in knowing her simple act of kindness had begun to matter to someone so guarded, and their conversations, which at first were small and cautious, about paint colors, the city's favorite cafes, and trivial memories from places like New York or Toronto, gradually deepened into confessions of fear, loss, and hope, revealing cracks in Daniel's armor that few had ever glimpsed and creating a bond built on shared understanding rather than pity. because Emma never tried to fix him or tell him what to feel. She simply listened, letting him spill fragments of his life and heartbreak like pieces of a puzzle, and with every story, his trust in her grew, the soft cadence of her voice becoming a comfort that he began to crave, and soon their meetings became moments he anticipated, looking forward to the evenings when the center emptied and the outside world quieted, leaving only the two of them in the glow of fluorescent lights and the faint smell of wet paint and paper, where he could talk without fear and she could offer reassurance without overstepping, and the change was subtle at first, like the way a dawn creeps over a horizon, unnoticed until you realize the world is filled with color again. Daniel found himself laughing at her small jokes, remembering things she mentioned, and even taking care to notice details about her that he hadn't before, like the way her hair fell over her shoulder when she leaned toward the table or the thoughtful pause she took before answering, while Emma discovered that the gentle attention he offered was not needy but genuine, that he wanted to connect, to share, and to trust. And as these evenings unfolded, Daniel began to speak not only of his past relationship but of the dreams he had abandoned, the regrets that lingered in quiet corners of his mind, and Emma encouraged him with soft words, nods, and a smile that seemed to say, "I hear you, and I'm here," without pushing or pressuring, creating a safe space where vulnerability was welcome, and over time, a habit formed, one neither had expected but both silently welcomed. They looked forward to each meeting, to the moments of quiet understanding, the walks out into the drizzle after the center closed, the shared coffees, and the light conversations that sometimes lingered late into the night when the city felt still and private, and Daniel, who had once felt isolated by his heartbreak, began to realize that Emma's presence was no longer just comforting, it was essential, the thought of a day without her leaving an unexpected ache, while Emma herself recognized that her feelings were shifting, that the warmth she felt in his company was more than friendship, more than the simple satisfaction of helping someone heal, though she never allowed herself to name it aloud, aware that the line between emotional support and romantic attraction was delicate and needed care, and yet the subtle touches, the way their hands sometimes brushed as they moved supplies, the lingering glances, the quiet smiles exchanged over shared jokes or stories, all built a tension neither could deny, a soft pull toward something deeper, something that felt thrilling yet terrifying in its honesty, and Daniel, sensing this too, hesitated in the moments that mattered, unsure if he should risk their fragile connection for the possibility of more, afraid of losing the safe haven Emma had become, yet unable to ignore the stirring in his chest, while Emma, noticing the small hesitations in his voice and the way he lingered before leaving, felt her heart respond with equal intensity, realizing that what had started as help had grown into a connection neither could contain with words alone, a bond that required patience, trust, and courage. And one evening, as they walked together under a canopy of streetlights reflecting on wet pavement, Daniel paused, eyes searching hers, and quietly asked, "Can we talk like this more often?" A question so simple yet heavy with meaning that Emma felt her pulse quicken, and as she nodded, agreeing without hesitation, the moment hung between them like a promise, a delicate acknowledgement that their lives were intertwining in ways that were beautiful, tender, and unpredictable, and though neither spoke the full depth of what they felt, both sensed that their connection was becoming more than habit, more than friendship, and perhaps the first stirrings of love, built slowly on trust, empathy, and the gentle realization that sometimes, helping someone heal can awaken feelings you never expected, leading to emotions that are thrilling, confusing, and utterly human. And by the time they parted that night, the city silent around them except for the soft patter of rain, both carried a new understanding, that they had entered a delicate dance of hearts, one where trust, care, and attraction blended in quiet, electrifying ways, setting the stage for the moments that would follow. Were asking for more would no longer be just about help, but about longing, desire, and the careful awakening of love that neither could ignore. As the weeks passed, the connection between Daniel Brooks and Emma Carter deepened in ways that neither had anticipated, their casual conversations transforming into shared confidences that revealed fears, dreams, and the quiet, tender places in their hearts that had been long untouched, and the art center became more than a space filled with brushes and canvases. It became a sanctuary where they could exist without masks, where Daniel could speak of the loneliness that followed him home at night and Emma could share the subtle anxieties that made her careful around people she trusted, and in these moments, They discovered a rhythm together, one built on silence as much as words, on laughter as much as the weight of unspoken emotions, and the way Daniel would look at her sometimes, with an intensity that made her stomach flutter, or the way Emma's voice would soften just enough to draw him closer emotionally, created a delicate tension neither wanted to rush yet both felt growing with every passing day. Daniel began noticing everything about her, the small gestures she made when focused on a task, the way her eyes brightened when she remembered a happy memory, the way she sometimes bit her lip when thinking carefully before speaking, and these little details lodged themselves in his mind, making him realize that what he felt was no longer simple gratitude or comfort, but a profound attraction he hadn't allowed himself to admit before, while Emma, in turn, started to feel the same pull, a warmth in her chest when he lingered nearby, a longing in the pauses of conversation that hinted at something more than friendship, yet neither wanted to force the feeling into words too soon, understanding that what they shared was fragile and needed patience. One evening, after they had spent hours talking about their childhoods, regrets, and the roads that had led them to Seattle, Daniel grew unusually quiet, staring at the reflections of streetlights on the wet pavement outside the art center's window. And Emma sensed a shift in the air, a question forming but not yet spoken, a weight that made her pulse quicken and her thoughts race, because she knew that the emotions simmering between them were moving beyond safety and into territory that felt dangerously close to romance, the kind that could change everything if acknowledged. "I don't want to lose this," Daniel said finally, his voice low and careful, a mixture of fear and honesty that made Emma's heart ache, and she looked at him, searching for meaning, for the courage behind the words, because they carried more than they seemed, more than friendship, more than habit, more than comfort. They carried the desire for connection, for closeness, for the possibility of something neither had dared to name, and Emma felt herself responding not with caution, but with the same unspoken longing, the same recognition that she had begun to feel alive in his presence in a way that went beyond caring, that went beyond helping, that touched something soft and vulnerable inside her that had been dormant for too long. The realization came slowly, like dawn breaking over a city skyline, that Daniel's presence had become essential to her, that she thought about him outside the art center, wondered about him when she was alone, and caught herself smiling at memories of their conversations, the laughter, the shared moments of quiet understanding, and she understood that he was feeling the same, that the gentle habits, the late-night talks, the small acts of kindness had woven a tapestry of connection that was both thrilling and terrifying in its intensity, and though neither crossed the line into overt romance, the tension between them was palpable, a living thing that pulsed with every shared glance and every hesitant word. That night, as they walked out together into the drizzle, the city lights reflecting off the slick streets, Daniel's hand brushed against hers, a brief contact that lingered longer than necessary, and Emma felt a jolt of awareness, a recognition that they were no longer simply friends or confidants, that the space between them had shifted subtly but irrevocably, and when he asked, "Can we talk like this, more often?" the simplicity of the question carried a weight of longing and unspoken desire that both thrilled and terrified her, because it was an acknowledgement that he wanted more than just her help, that he wanted presence, connection, and perhaps the beginning of something tender, emotional, and romantic. Emma nodded, agreeing without hesitation, and in that moment, a new chapter began, one filled with uncharted territory, with the careful dance of feelings that neither had anticipated, where trust, emotional vulnerability, and attraction mingled in ways that were both exhilarating and daunting, and the realization that help had grown into something more made every smile, every glance, every shared silence heavier with meaning, as if each interaction carried the promise of intimacy, understanding, and the possibility of love, and though they left the street that night without speaking the full truth of their feelings, both carried with them the awareness that they had crossed a line in their hearts, that the connection they shared was evolving into something profoundly emotional, a bond that was tender, complicated, and deeply human, and that this new stage required patience, care, and courage, because acknowledging the stirrings of desire and romantic attraction was both beautiful and terrifying, yet the pull between them was undeniable, a quiet magnetic force that promised that when they met again, when they shared another conversation, another walk, another quiet moment of understanding, the unspoken question of what could be would loom closer to being answered, and both Emma and Daniel felt it, the slow, thrilling, emotional tension of two hearts discovering that they had grown from strangers into companions, from companions into confidants, and from confidants into something that might just be love, a feeling neither wanted to rush but both secretly longed for, a delicate, tender, and utterly human awakening of desire, trust, and emotional intimacy that would shape everything to come. The weeks that followed brought Daniel and Emma closer in ways that neither had expected, the quiet moments at the art center evolving into shared routines, small adventures around Seattle, and long walks where conversation drifted from trivial things to dreams, regrets, and the subtle fears they had both carried alone for so long, and each meeting, each laugh, each glance seemed to draw them nearer, building a connection that was tender, emotional, and slowly transforming into something undeniably romantic, though neither wanted to rush, knowing the fragility of what they had built, a delicate trust that could not be forced, yet both sensed its weight and importance, and one evening, as the city lights shimmered on wet streets after a gentle rain, they sat on a bench overlooking the water, the skyline casting reflections that danced like tiny sparks across the surface, and Daniel turned to Emma with a seriousness that made her heart tighten, aware that this moment might mark a turning point, a choice that could deepen their bond or change it forever, and he spoke carefully, his voice steady but his hands trembling slightly. "You helped me heal," he said, "but somewhere along the way, I realized I don't just want help anymore," and the simplicity of his words carried the depth of everything they had shared, the hours of conversation, the laughter, the silences that had held so much meaning, the moments of understanding that had bridged the loneliness they both had known, and Emma listened, her chest swelling with emotion, feeling the truth of what he said resonate with what she had secretly felt for weeks, the warmth in her heart growing as she realized that the connection she had nurtured had become a longing, a desire to be close in ways that were more than companionship, more than friendship, more than habit. Daniel continued, eyes searching hers for a sign, a permission, a reflection of his own feelings. "I want something honest," he said quietly, "something new, with you, if you feel it too," and Emma felt a rush of emotions, excitement, fear, anticipation, and relief, all mingling as she recognized that this was the moment she had been waiting for without knowing it, the moment when unspoken feelings could finally be acknowledged and embraced, and she understood that what they had built, slowly, carefully, over weeks of late-night talks, shared laughter, quiet understanding, and emotional support, was now ready to evolve into love, a love that was tender, cautious, yet full of promise, and she realized that her own heart had been moving toward this point, that she had begun to crave his presence not just for the comfort it provided, but for the warmth, joy, and subtle thrill that came with being truly seen and understood by someone she cared for deeply, and after a long pause, she responded, quietly but firmly, "I do feel it, but only if we choose it carefully," and Daniel smiled, a mixture of relief, respect, and genuine happiness, knowing that she was willing to step forward with him, cautiously but wholeheartedly, into something new, something real, something romantic, and in that instant, a shift occurred, a turning point where their bond, built on emotional trust and shared vulnerability, blossomed into a mutual understanding that they could explore their feelings together without fear, judgment, or rushing, allowing love to grow naturally, gently, and authentically. The following days carried a new energy, a lightness that was noticeable in the way they interacted, the way Daniel would remember small details she mentioned, the way Emma felt her heart lift at a glance or a touch that lingered just a second too long, and their walks, coffees, and shared conversations carried a layer of intimacy that was thrilling yet comfortable, the kind of closeness that comes from truly knowing someone, from seeing them at their most vulnerable and still feeling drawn, enchanted, and safe, and this new chapter was marked not by grand gestures but by small, meaningful moments, laughter over shared jokes, quiet glances that held volumes, the gentle brush of hands as they passed items or settled near each other, and the simple, unspoken joy of knowing they were no longer alone in their hearts or lives. Emma found herself reflecting on how far they had come, from strangers in the art center to confidants, from confidants to companions, and now, to partners in the delicate dance of budding romance, a progression that felt natural and right, a testament to patience, understanding, and emotional honesty, while Daniel felt a similar exhilaration, the sense that he had found someone who could truly see him, someone with whom he could share the complicated mixture of past hurts, present joys, and future hopes, and yet, the story of their connection remained grounded, real, and relatable, filled with moments of doubt, reflection, and careful decision-making, because both understood that love required attention, respect, and the willingness to navigate uncertainty together. One afternoon, sitting in the art center surrounded by canvases and brushes, Daniel looked at Emma and said softly, "I can't imagine my days without you now," and she smiled, feeling the truth of his words echo in her own heart. The realization that the support they had shared, the patience they had shown, and the trust they had built had blossomed into something beautiful, something worth protecting and nurturing, and she responded with a gentle affirmation, a quiet agreement that they would explore this new chapter together, carefully, intentionally, and with full awareness of the emotions at play. Their days became a mixture of art, laughter, reflection, and quiet romance, each moment layered with the understanding that love was not always about grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but often about presence, attentiveness, and the courage to let someone into your heart slowly, allowing the bond to grow naturally. And Daniel and Emma discovered that this kind of love, the love that develops from shared experiences, mutual respect, and deep emotional connection, was perhaps the most fulfilling of all, a love that brought joy, warmth, and a sense of completeness that neither had felt in years, a love that was gentle, patient, romantic, and entirely real. And as they walked home one evening under the soft glow of streetlights, hands brushing occasionally, smiles lingering, hearts quietly racing, both knew that their journey together was only beginning, that the help and support that had brought them together had now transformed into something more profound, more beautiful, and more human, a love that promised tenderness, emotional intimacy, and the kind of connection that grows stronger with each shared moment, each glance, and each carefully chosen word. And in that realization, they both felt a sense of peace, excitement, and hope for the future, knowing that together they could navigate the delicate, thrilling, and deeply satisfying path of falling in love, step by step, moment by moment, without fear, without rush, and with hearts fully open to the promise of something extraordinary yet entirely grounded in honesty, respect, and the quiet magic of two people discovering that sometimes, accepting help leads not only to healing but to the gentle awakening of love, and asking for more, when done with care, can lead to the beginning of a beautiful, lasting connection that neither could have imagined when their paths first crossed in the quiet glow of the art center on that rainy evening.